Yeah, this is such an important topic. It is something that affects most humans
Yeah.
to some degree, and it affects us highly sensitives
That's exactly what
a
I was
lot
thinking.
more,
Yeah, that's
right?
it's almost like if you were born highly sensitive, you
Mhm.
are born with this
Mm.
predisposition towards being probably what is the more familiar term, a people pleaser.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We're so darn good at it.
Yeah, I know.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it actually gives you a lot of positive kind of byproducts that are reinforcing. We're going to go over
Yep.
this, in
Mhm.
detail. But if you are a highly sensitive, because you're so good
Mhm.
at reading the feelings and the needs and the energy of others, it's easy to step into this space
Yeah.
and it gets reinforced so readily,
Mhm.
usually at a really young
Mhm.
age, that it becomes part of your identity.
That's right.
And it
Mhm.
serves you well when you're young, but then it can have like a whole host of complications both
Yeah.
within yourself and in your interpersonal
Mhm.
relationships when you become an adult. And most of the time, you're not aware at all what this is about.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I would say that, we're going to dive into more of the subtleties of people pleasing and rescuing. I think a lot of the time when people hear these terms, they think of, oh, everybody says, let's go to this restaurant. And so I don't really want to go there, but I just kind of go with it anyway. I don't want to make any waves. I don't want to upset anyone. So we just go along with it. And that certainly is one type of people pleasing, but there's a lot more subtle ways in which people pleasing and rescuing others can really show up within yourself and within your relationship. So our goal is to jump into those and really help you see kind of what those subtleties are within yourself, because once you become aware of them, well, A, you can't unsee them, but B, then you can really work with them and start to make those changes. So I'm really excited to dive into kind of the deeper pieces
right,
of people pleasing.
right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, let's get started.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have gone into this topic, at least the primer of
Mhm.
how people tend to become people pleasers in earlier video casts. And last year, November of 2019, we had a couple of video casts, one that focused on the narcissistic family system,
Mhm.
and then the second one, which was not seen, not heard.
They were both not seen, not heard, not safe.
Okay,
And
just part one and part
Mhm.
two.
Yep.
So we're going to review some of those, but we're not going to go into it in detail. But
Mhm.
if you are able to, those video casts really had some important foundational developmental processes that we think that you're really going to be able to relate to. And like so many other things, you come by this honestly.
Yeah.
All right. So everybody kind of develops their way of being in the world, with a combination of your innate temperament and personality and biochemistry, what happens in your family of origin, what culture you're born into,
Yeah,
what
sure.
goes on with, siblings or the world around you. So there's a lot of different factors that go into this. So we want you to understand it. Certainly never judge or blame yourself or
Right.
others.
Right.
But the more we can understand, the more you can say that makes a lot of sense. And let me see the things that I can change so that I can move forward in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned the earlier video cast from
Mhm.
last November. So let's do a really quick review
Okay.
for our newer members who maybe haven't had a chance to watch all of them yet. We talked about the narcissistic family system and how that can really set the stage for this people pleasing and rescuing tendency. And, a narcissistic family system is one in which the caregivers, the parents, are so focused on getting their own needs met that they are not able to prioritize the child's needs. And these can be physical needs, but these can also be emotional, psychological, and developmental needs. And so the messaging that the child takes in, whether it's overt or more likely covert, is your needs don't matter as much or at all in some cases. And your needs aren't important. Your needs are not the priority. Your needs don't deserve space in this system. And you certainly can't inconvenience us, the parents, with your needs. And as a child, we really look to this system to teach us about ourselves and our world. So if the system is saying your needs don't matter, guess what you're going to bring into your sense of self as you grow up into adolescence and then into adulthood? My needs don't matter. Okay.
Right.
And then you are going to be the person that steps into your own life and starts to silence your needs and starts to hold back and say, no, don't say that. Don't upset them. Don't inconvenience them. Don't take up the emotional space with your needs. And then you end up doing to yourself what that narcissistic family system originally was doing to you.
Right. Exactly. So the other way that a narcissistic family system supports the development of being a people pleaser is that when you have a narcissist for one or two parents, what really matters to the narcissist is, getting their needs met or something that makes them look good. And so it's not that they never will give you praise, but they will give you praise based on their needs or what's important to them.
Yes.
So if you are a child, and we all need praise, right? We all do. Children crave that. Please notice me, acknowledge me. What do you think of me? Please love me.
Tell me I'm good.
Yes. Can I show you this? Can I show you this? So what ends up happening, especially if you are a highly sensitive, is you become really good at reading. What do mom or dad want me to do or be, or what's important to them? What are their needs? And let me step in and give it to them. Because if I give it to them, then I'm going to get the, oh my gosh, you're such a good daughter, or you're such a good son. And that feels good. So you hone that radar and you get that reinforcement that says, when I accurately read somebody else's needs and I step in and I deliver it, then I get the goods. Okay. Somebody thinks highly of me. They compliment me. They notice me, or they love me. And of course, that's going to get reinforced and wired within your very young self.
Yeah. And sometimes you may not get the goods per se, but you at least get an absence of the bad.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe you get an absence of their anger or their rage or their snide comments or disappointment. And so if you can't get the goods, at least you can figure out how to dampen the bad.
Right. Yeah. So those are really like three ways, that especially if you are in this narcissistic family system, or a system that for some reason is not able to readily meet your needs. Sometimes, a parent or a primary attachment figure has cancer, or they have depression. They're just emotionally devoid of being able to be attuned to children in the way that they should. Sometimes poverty is present, and a parent is a single mother or a single father and has to work two jobs and literally is not able to be physically and sometimes emotionally present because they're so tapped into it and tapped out themselves.
Right, exactly.
So there's lots of different ways that your needs may not get met. And especially if you are a wonderful, highly sensitive soul, you are going to, because it's your emotional survival, find out a way to please get noticed, to please get the good stuff, or to have the absence of the negative. If there is a situation with ridicule or verbal abuse, or just kind of like volatile behavior. Right?
Yeah. Another way that this people pleasing can really get developed, even in a really loving home where your needs are prioritized. When you're a nice kid and you follow the rules, it makes your parents' life easier. I mean, there's just no question about it. We're both
Right.
moms. We get that.
Right.
And so sometimes what can happen with no malintent whatsoever can be this inadvertent reinforcement of being nice and being good. So, maybe you're the oldest sibling and you get praised for being such a good role model for your younger siblings. Or maybe you're a younger sibling who has watched an older sibling not be very nice or not follow the rules or not be good. And then you think, well, gosh, I don't want to get that kind of reaction from my parents. So I'm going to be the good kid. So in some ways, families that have the best of intentions can actually inadvertently reinforce this character trait. And if you're an HSP, you're so good, a highly sensitive person, so good at knowing what's going to make mom's life easier, what's going to make dad's life easier. And then when you get the praise for doing that, it can really reinforce that. And this can, one other thing, sorry. And then the other piece is if the family system doesn't welcome you kind of bringing your voice forward, knowing that it might, create a couple of waves, knowing that it might require a tough family conversation, but a healthy family system is going to say, no, please tell us what you're thinking or feeling. We want to hear it. Let's have that conversation. The system can handle it. And we really value your voice and your feelings and your needs. So, you can get praised for being good and nice. You can also not really get invited to share things that might make waves. And then both of those experiences can just very naturally reinforce that people-pleasing HSP quality.
Or you learn that it's not safe, right?
Sure.
To have a dissenting voice. So I think that that's something else. So you really learn that, I need to just be agreeable. So I think that's one thing. So I was just going to say earlier, what ends up happening with this, especially if it gets reinforced, is it really becomes part of your identity. Okay. And this happens at a really young age. So maybe even now you might, be wondering, does this fit me? Does this not? Like people pleasing. Well, I'm just a nice person. I'm just really kind. I like doing for other people. I like meeting other people's needs more than I like meeting my own needs. And of course, there is nothing wrong with being a kind person. And we're going to go over like what that means to be kind and giving versus like overstepping your own boundaries. But this happens so early that it becomes part of your identity. I'm the good girl. I'm the agreeable one. I'm the one that always puts other people's needs before my own, right? And this becomes just who you are. It doesn't mean that those other very, very healthy needs to pay attention to myself and my own needs, that those go away. Those are still operating under the surface. And those are going to be some of those things that get activated as an adult that you're not even aware of. Okay. So I guess the main point is this happens all for a reason. It's nobody's fault. This is not to blame you or necessarily the family system. It's always a combination of things that come together in the most perfect, imperfect storm. Because it happens during formative years, it becomes part of your identity. So you don't even think about it until something happens, and we can then increase awareness and you can be more mindful of it. Yet there's this underlying resentment, or there's an experience in life that doesn't feel right. We're going to go over that in the future parts to this video cast. So this is how it gets created, and we really want to start kind of opening up your mind, opening up your eyes to insight when you explore kind of, does this relate to me? Is this maybe what's going on within myself and or within my interpersonal system?
And when I people please and when I rescue and overstep my own boundaries, how does that then fit into my relationship with food.
Yes.
Okay, because it's always connected, guys. There's
Yes.
always a connection
Yes.
there. And I will, bet every penny I have that, food is waiting to comfort you after you have people pleased, after you have rescued, after you have tried to make somebody else comfortable at the expense of your well-being, and or not getting in return that same level of care from the other person, and then feeling so down about that. And so we're going to get into all of that, but just kind of a little sneak peek into how food is going to fit into this equation.
Right. Yep. Thank you for always
Yeah.
connecting those dots.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Good.
So let's talk about, I
Mhm.
mean, first of all, let's talk a little bit about people pleasing
Mhm.
and just kind of like that general, kind of term that
Mhm.
is probably most familiar. And then what we'd like to do is to go into a couple other subtle
Mhm.
examples that we see all the time in our clients and in this population who use food as a way to cope with their emotions. And again, really invite you to take this in and go, wow, I wonder if I see any of myself in this. I wonder if this might be part of what goes on that then compels me to use food that I have not even been aware of.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So do you want
absolutely.
to talk about like the general kind of people pleasing?
Sure. Yeah, I think, in general, people pleasing is doing things to try to make others happy, to try to make them comfortable. Sometimes this can be to prevent a negative response or situation, right? So we have those idioms like we don't want to upset the apple cart, we don't want to make waves, we want to go along to get along. So people pleasing is really going to be prioritizing other people's needs, feelings, and comfort levels at the expense of your own.
Right.
Okay. There's a really important distinction that you touched on, Dr. Julie, that you can care about others,
Yes.
you can care for others, you can do for others. That is not what we're talking
Right.
about. You can prioritize others' needs at times. That's perfectly normal and healthy in loving relationships. Where the rub is when it starts to happen at the expense of your well-being. So if your needs are going unmet and that's causing distress or angst within you, now we're looking at people pleasing, and we really want to unpack what is driving that urge that you have to keep everybody okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, because there really is this deep-seated fear that if that person isn't okay, then I'm not okay.
Right.
And that's the piece that we really want to look at.
Yeah. No, I love how you differentiated that, because it is very, very, very possible to be kind and giving and focused on others and to not be a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so important, because when people start working on this, then they think, does that mean that I'm not going to be a good person? Does that mean that I'm not going to be kind or not have a big, generous heart? And the answer is you can be kind and have a huge, generous heart and still not be a people pleaser. All right. So it's always about putting yourself into that equation and making sure that your giving is coming from a healthy place.
Yeah. I think a good litmus test for that is if you challenge yourself to have some healthy boundaries, does that feel healthy and appropriate, or does that feel mean?
Or scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or scary. Or
Yeah,
anxiety
absolutely.
provoking, Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because I think a lot of times people pleasers in general, and just so you guys know, I say all of this with love and compassion because I am a recovering people pleaser too. So you're in good company if this resonates with you. We don't say any of this as we're better than or have it all figured out.
Done that. Yeah.
Where was I going with this? Oh, I think when you're in people pleasing, you really esteem yourself for being nice. You esteem yourself for being thoughtful and caring and giving and nice. And so if you step out of people pleasing, your brain might latch onto, well, then I'm doing the opposite, which is mean. And when I'm in the initial work with people on boundary setting and identifying what they need and prioritizing those needs, they say, but Dr. Ashley, that
Mhm.
feels so mean. So that can be a helpful litmus test if there's a lot of fear, if there's this feeling that you would be mean if you were to have those boundaries or set those limits or let people be disappointed. That might be an indicator that people pleasing has probably kind of crept into your psyche a
Yeah, yeah.
bit. Mhm.
And I keep going back to that identity piece too,
Yeah.
because I think that that's the other thing that comes up is the thought about changing this can be really disrupting to people because like that's who they've always been. You know, they've always been the one that someone goes to, you know, if they have a problem or, you know, if they need help or they've always been the agreeable one, you know. So
Mhm.
whether that is like in a family system or whether that's in a relationship, you know, a lot of times if you're in a long-term romantic relationship and you think about changing this, there's just a lot of, you know, are they still going to like who I am? You know, this has been my identity. So I think that that's
Mhm.
also part of that litmus test.
Absolutely.
If you just really feel like this is just going to disrupt
Mhm.
who you are and how you have been in the world and how other people see you and identify you as, then I think that this is like, wow, did this get developed, you know, through
Mhm.
people pleasing?
Sure. And it is really challenging when you know, come into this awareness as an adult because you have created a lot of relationships, most likely with friends, with maybe a partner, with colleagues,
Mhm.
you know, with this dynamic in action, not knowing that that's what you're doing. So to change it can be very disruptive and can make the process even harder.
Right. Sure.
And so
Absolutely.
just kind of knowing that that's a normal part of it and letting the relationship be redefined if it's even salvageable. You know, sometimes this dynamic might be with somebody who also doesn't have a real healthy interpersonal dynamic and they can't tolerate you getting healthy. And so they might say, you know, I'm not going to do this, but it can create upheaval, but it also leads you to peace. And that's where we want to get you to, because
Yeah.
otherwise food is going to keep coming in to offer that temporary peacefulness.
Yeah. And peace and relationships that are based on who you are, you know, not just what you're giving,
Yeah.
you know, to others. Right. So
Yeah,
so there's so
absolutely.
there's a lot on the other end of
Mhm.
this, although it always feels scary when we think about starting to look at it and possibly dismantling something that your coping mechanism, you know, like your whole coping system has been developed around.
Right.
So lots of different pieces, and we know we've just thrown a ton at you. And I do apologize for that. I was aware as we're talking. I think both of us are trying to give the background primer, and
Mhm.
then have this content that we want to go deep into. We're aware of so many new people that came into our community that might not have seen that November month. So we we don't want to overwhelm you with, you know, too much that we're throwing at you. And if you can go and look at those other
Mhm.
video casts, because we've heard over and over and over again is, oh my goodness, this speaks to me.
Yeah.
It helps me to understand myself and how I got to be this way. uh, Less judgment towards yourself, and then a roadmap out,
Yeah.
because we always get our roadmap out by understanding what has created it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So maybe now we can slow down a little bit. And
I think we're just so excited.
I know, I know. So let's talk. Let's talk about these kind of other, you know, deeper
Mhm.
ways besides the more commonly known
Yeah.
people pleasing. And why
Yeah.
don't you start with the first topic that we had talked about?
Yeah, so one that really stands out to me is over functioning as a subtle way of people pleasing. And the way that I define over functioning is really like doing more than your fair share in the relationship on a consistent basis and to the degree that the other person isn't really pulling their proverbial weight.
Mhm.
Okay, so you are over functioning, and over functioners really need an under functioner to allow the over functioning to happen. Okay, so this might look like at work doing more than is your fair share, doing other people's work for them because they're not doing it or you don't think they're going to do it, but really kind of stepping in and doing more. At home, this might look like a really unbalanced distribution of chores and household tasks, maybe parenting, where again, you're doing the bulk of it on a consistent basis. And there's that resentment kind of
Yes.
lurking in the background.
Yes.
That's always going to be a piece that we're watching for to help us determine, is this in a healthy place or is this
Mhm.
not?
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say that's what we're going to get into in next week's
Mhm.
or 2 weeks from now video cast. But these feelings of underlying resentment.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, because a lot of times these systems are put into place, I mean, people come together in complementary ways.
Mhm.
But if there is then that feeling of resentment or burnout,
Mhm. Yeah.
then you know that there's something going on that really needs to be looked at.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, again, with lots of compassion and curiosity, we trace
Mhm.
that back because somewhere along the way, you got esteemed for over
Yeah.
functioning. You got that praise, you got that attention, you got that goodness
Mhm.
for holding things together, doing more than your fair share,
Mm.
doing more than what was reasonable for your developmental stage and age.
Yeah, doing the laundry, cleaning the house,
Mhm.
being a big helper to mom.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, a
Mhm.
family system that allowed that to
That
happen,
allowed that to
and
happen, exactly.
reinforced that, so
Mhm.
that became, wow, this is good. This
Yep.
makes people like me.
Mhm.
This is how I'm supposed to be in the
Mhm.
world.
Yep.
That's how that gets created. Yeah.
Yeah, so watch for that overfunctioning. That is a more subtle way that people
Hmm.
pleasing can be very insidious and kind of creep its way into lots of areas of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah, so the next way that I see is what I call overstepping your
Mhm.
own boundaries. And this, I think, is going to be a really important concept to look at relative to what we talked about with, if you are a kind and giving and
Mhm.
loving person, which
Mhm.
most
You
of our
all are.
yeah, I mean, and this is why we love working with our population. I mean, because really highly sensitives, they are very kind people by nature.
Mhm.
I mean, and it is part of who you are. That's like
Mhm.
who your spirit is. And it's a beautiful thing to give. It really, really is. And we get back a lot of positive when
Mhm.
we give, just even within
Absolutely.
ourselves, because it makes us feel good.
Mhm.
But what we're talking about is when somebody asks you to do something,
Mhm.
or if you think, hey, I think this would be a good idea to do for this
Mhm.
person, and you really don't want to do it. Okay. Maybe you're overtired. Maybe you feel like the relationship is unequal. Maybe the other person is asking you to do something that just doesn't feel right for you,
Mhm. Mhm.
but you don't honor your own boundaries. And there can be a whole host of reasons why. If I say no, they're going to get mad at me. If I say no, they're not going to like me and invite me next time. They're going to think that I'm not a good friend.
Mhm.
So a lot of times it's based in that fear.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, or you think that this is just kind of an expectation that these other
Mhm.
people have, and I need to do this. But I always get this like visceral feeling in my gut
Mhm.
when I know that there's something that I don't want to do that I might be considering doing. And I just get this feeling in my gut that says, nope, Julie, that would be overstepping your own boundaries. So when you don't listen to that feeling inside, however it shows up in you, you overstep those boundaries, and then you might do something, but you do it with resentment. Okay. So, you kind of begrudge it as you're doing it, even if you put a smile on your
Mhm.
face.
Mhm.
And you tend to get mad at the other person. And a lot of times, that other person might not even know what's going on with you. Maybe you're doing something for them that they didn't even ask you to do, but you think that you should do. You overstep a boundary, and then it ends up interfering with that relationship.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people pleasers overstep their own boundary because they've got this underlying lack of true self confidence and true self
Mhm.
worth and esteem that says, I can say no and someone's still going to value me. I can communicate my reason for no and people are going to understand. Okay.
or they're not going to value me because they really need me to
Yeah.
please, and
And
I'm okay anyway.
right, exactly. Because
Mhm.
I value myself. And
Right.
if they are going to judge me for that, then they're not worth it. So that would be somebody that has that healthy self-esteem. So one of the things that I like to say in this area of overstepping boundaries, and just try this on, we're probably getting again a little bit ahead of ourselves, but a boundary is something I set so I can love you without resentment. Okay. So being able to set a boundary so that I can love you without resentment. Because if I don't set this boundary, right, either that someone else has asked me to do and I'm going to say no, or within myself, I'm going to do it and I'm going to resent that person and it's going to negatively affect how I feel about them. And I'm going to carry around some negativity within myself.
Yeah, you feel lousy when you overstep your own boundaries.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. So definitely think about when you think of, am I a people pleaser? How do I approach things? Is when I get this feeling of, I really don't want to do that. All right. Do I give myself permission to set a boundary and say, I'm so sorry, I can't do that on Friday afternoon. I'm just overspent. Or do I say, sure, what time do you want me to be there? And then you are like mad or tighten your stomach, or maybe you emotionally eat until Friday and then probably Friday night as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is that overstepping of your own boundaries. Okay, whether it was asked from somebody else or you did it within yourself.
Yeah, a really important way in which people pleasing shows up. Another really important one is, really working hard to please and make others happy, to really orchestrate a certain outcome, okay, to try to control the situation. And I'm going to use a word here, and I want you guys to hear it the way I intend to because it has a sting to it, but manipulate. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way or you are manipulative, but when we are people pleasing, okay, we are actually trying to get the other person or people to respond a certain way or do a certain thing. And that is the definition of manipulate, to try to create the outcome that you want. Okay. And a lot of this is rooted in those early life experiences where this was your form of emotional survival. So please hear these words without any judgment or criticism whatsoever. But we have to really look at, this dynamic where we are trying to control the outcome. So if I people please and I agree to something, or I don't speak up and I just kind of let the other people make a decision, what happens is it often is tied with a very silent expectation that if I'm quiet right now, if I go along to get along, if I agree to this, then the expectation is you will like me, you will be happy, you will return the favor when the tables are turned, you will be nicer, you won't rage, whatever the expectation is, right? This isn't spoken with the other person. It may not even be in your conscious awareness, but there is this silent expectation that if I please this person, then I will get something in return. And the kicker here is a lot of times you're not going to get that in return, which is then going to set into motion resentment and other things. And we'll get to that later on and how all that ties into food. So really another subtle way that people pleasing shows up is in hoping for certain outcomes and having expectations that if I do this, then I will get this. Okay. If I'm nice, then they'll be nice. If I'm quiet, then they'll ask me, what I want. And when that doesn't happen, it's not good.
If I give a lot, if I give a lot of gifts or if I give a lot of praise, right, then they're going to give that back to me. And, and then feeling like, hey, I give more, than I get back in relationships. And again, we have to look at the motivation and intent because, it's nice to give in relationships, but if it's like, I'm going to give all of this because I really want you to give to me, then that's when it becomes that what you're talking about,
Yeah.
kind of like doing something, with the goal of if I treat this person this way, then I'm going to get this in return instead of I'm going to just treat the person this way because that's what it feels like in my heart.
Yeah.
And whatever I get back, I'll notice, but I'm not doing this behavior with the expectation of what I'm going to get back.
Right. And I think in a healthy relationship, you don't have to worry about, keeping tabs and who's functioning, how much, because there's just this innate trust that I'm going to give to the relationship in ways that feel, aligned with my values and my morals. And this person's going to give back in really loving, healthy ways. And it's just going to kind of work. When it gets into those unhealthy dynamics, or maybe there's over functioning and under functioning and people pleasing, you start to keep score, and you start to expect that you do this, then they're going to do this, and then it sets into motion all these expectations, then they don't get met, then feelings come up, and it's not a healthy dynamic.
Right. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So really the last area, and there's a little bit of overlap with the other areas that we've talked about, but I think it's still worthy of mentioning. And that is people pleasing in the form of changing yourself, okay, to feel like you are going to be more accepted or more loved, okay, if you are what you think this person wants you to be, okay. And that is just so, like I say that, I just have like this sick feeling inside. And I think that, that really comes from empathy of people that just don't feel good enough about themselves, that to be me in my real form is not going to be acceptable to this person. And I'm willing to, disregard or disrespect myself by changing myself to be what I think this other person wants or needs me to be.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you think that your personality is too loud or you have too much energy or, they wouldn't like my humor, or I don't want to be too smart because then they might, be intimidated, or I'm going to really decrease some of my, accolades because I don't want them to think, I think too highly of myself. Or I'm going to let go of some interests that are really true to me and I'm going to adopt this other person's interests. So I'm in this relationship and I'm ending up spending all of this time, riding a motorcycle with somebody else and I hate it, but I don't want them to know that because I think that then they won't like me. Right. So you go further and further and further away from yourself with the consequence of, feeling disconnected, feeling more kind of depressed and deadened inside. And eventually you're going to really resent, okay, those activities and the other person because you're going to think, hey, like, look, I have to come along with them. They're making me. But you've never said, hey, why don't you go on your motorcycle ride and I'll stay home and, do photography and do some writing or go out with a girlfriend,
Or let's go ride the motorcycle and then can we allocate time to do something that I really want to do? So it can be balanced too.
Exactly. So all of these ways that, I think as we're saying all of this, it's feeling like, I am not enough to be completely honest and true to myself, to, listen to my own boundaries, to be truly who I am, to function just according to, what I feel is fair and I have the energy for, to not try to read somebody's mood and be nice and make sure everything is fine for them so that they don't rage, unexpectedly. So really not allowing yourself to just be and to feel good enough about yourself or secure enough within yourself that you can allow that, or walking away from a relationship that you feel people would judge who you are or it would be unsafe for you to be who you are. So you go into all of these emotional ways to try to stay connected and engaged and in someone else's high regard, and it ends up, giving yourself the message that says who I am is not okay over and over and over again, which is very likely a repetition of what happened to you when you
Right.
were young. So
Yeah.
you step into that within yourself and you're giving yourself the same message. We can't be true to who we are, because then this person's not going to see us, hear us, want to be with us.
Right. Yeah, and I would add to that, I think people pleasing is really based in a lot of assumptions.
Yes.
Assumptions that this person
Yes.
is going to be mad, that they are going to reject you. And I think there's also the assumption that if you don't make them happy or keep them happy, that they can't be happy. And it really kind of takes the accountability off of them to be responsible for their own feelings, because that over functioning and people pleasing, you're stepping in and saying, hey, I don't think you can kind of figure out how to make yourself happy, so I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to sacrifice myself so that you can be happy. And that may be true. This person really may not have a developed enough self to take responsibility for their emotions and well-being, and that may be an accurate reading that you're picking up on. Your task is to notice that and not overstep anyway. But it also may be an erroneous assumption that, maybe you can put your needs out there and maybe they can be a little annoyed or frustrated that they're not going to get it the way that they want it, and they can handle that. So a healthy relationship has space for people to say, hey, I don't love that. Hey, that kind of frustrates me or kind of annoys me, but I can handle that. I can manage those emotions. I can use my voice. I can go, self-regulate. I can take care of myself. We can figure this out so that you don't have to sacrifice yourself to just keep things peaceful. That is not a sustainable way to live or relate. So watch those assumptions as well, because people pleasing often has a lot of inaccurate assumptions.
A lot of assumptions, and that's where that communication comes in. But it takes the risk to be able to say, that I am going to risk stepping out of this people pleasing behavior at risk that they might not like it, to even like check out the assumption.
Sure.
So some of that is building up some of that positive regard within yourself, so that you say, hey, I'm going to risk and I'm going to communicate it. And if they don't like it or if they walk away, I'm going to be up for the task of dealing with that.
I'll be okay.
I'll be okay.
Yeah, and that really is, the deeper work of that is healing usually those associated earlier life experiences where your caregiver wasn't okay if you didn't please them.
Right.
They weren't regulating their emotions if you didn't make their life easier or be the good person, the good kid, or silence yourself. So you carry that kind of trauma forward, and those beliefs forward that, back then they weren't okay and I had to be nice and good to keep the peace. And so now that's just how relationships are. Nobody else can manage their emotions and I've got to do it for them. And breaking out of people pleasing and breaking out of binge eating is in large part really looking at these assumptions, seeing that they're there, seeing it without judgment, and starting to appreciate where they come from, but challenge them and shore yourself up and really step into a place of curiosity, like, could I handle it if this person weren't okay? Because you know what? You can. You will be okay. But it's moving through the fear and the anxiety and the uncertainty of those new experiences that is where this work is at. And that's really where we're going to move into next time, right? How all of this kind of affects the person internally after people pleasing.
Yeah. So again, if you guys feel, because as you consider this, because it is scary to think about changing this or speaking up or setting limits, especially if you've had those early experiences where you were rejected, where people withdrew their love or they ridiculed you, or maybe there was a playmate early on and you spoke up and then they, turned against you. So there's all of these past experiences. So what we want you to know is that this is a process. So we just want you right now to increase your awareness. Like, can I relate to any of these things that Dr. Julie and Dr. Ashley are talking about? If so, let me see how often that shows up within myself. Let me see how I feel about it. Maybe pay attention to how my body is feeling to get a good read of how this is affecting me. And then if there's one or two little things that I can consider risking to change, okay, maybe with someone that's super, 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 super safe, to kind of assert a real opinion, or to maybe, show that you're in a bad mood instead of putting a smile on your face.
Instead of being fine.
Yeah, instead of being fine. And starting to test that out, because it's like PTSD. We have these early experiences, and your psyche just thinks, okay, like, this is going to happen again. These new players come into your life, but the same thing's going to happen. And so, we avoid it. We do what is safe. But then we end up in this place where we really are not happy. We're not fulfilled. There's that resentment. And so we have to start changing it, but we want to remember that it's going to be piece by piece by piece.
Great point. And, in the big picture of people pleasing, it's not safe. It actually dumps you into emotions and interpersonal processes that are very hurtful and unsafe. So it is a short-term, way of relieving anxiety and avoiding conflict, but I promise you it brings with it long-term consequences. So it's worth doing the work.
Yeah, usually, when in younger years, it was a survival technique because you didn't have other choices, and so it really was all that you could do. And so it served you well. But when you go into adulthood, there's lots of different things where it doesn't serve you well. And a lot of times, you end up with people that this is complementary for. Yeah. So if you're a people pleaser, usually you can end up with someone that's really under functioning, or someone that's a taker, or
really
someone that is very self-centered, self-focused, because unfortunately that's how it comes together in this, really complementary way, even though it's detrimental for you. So we want to be able to kind of change that and to start risking that, and to, have new experiences where you learn this is okay. This person isn't rejecting me, and it actually feels better. So we were talking about just the negative, experiences inside.
Yeah.
So
we'll get more into that next time.
Okay, lots of stuff.
Yeah. Well, this will be one to watch a couple of times.
Yes.
Every time you hear it, you'll pick up a new piece as this material integrates. So if this is kind of newer stuff to be thinking about, let the big concepts sink in and integrate, and then come back and watch it again, and you'll pick up details, and it'll new things will resonate with you. I've been doing this stuff for years, and when I read a new article or book about these concepts, I'm like, oh, that's a good one. You can kind of bring those little pieces in. So give yourself a lot of space and grace through this process, and it is a process.
Yeah, and we'll have 3 video casts this month to be able to really flesh all of these concepts out. Next time, we're going to be talking a lot about the effect that this has on you within yourself. And then we will wrap up our 3rd one with how it really affects you in interpersonal relationships.
Yes, because there are some paradoxical effects, believe it or not. So it's important to know what those are.
Absolutely.
And we will do our Q&As in between.
Yes.
So next week we'll have our Q&A. So notice what's coming up, what questions are there. No question is a dumb question. So please put them out there. We'll answer all of them gladly, and then we'll go back into topic, and then Q&A, and then topic again. So we had some comments come in. Thank you. And definitely relating to this topic in a little bit. So good. I'm glad.
Good.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, everyone. So we'll see you next week. Please submit your questions. We do love to answer them. And we will see you in a week.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.